Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with his good friend, Mr. Stephen Dow. How are you?
I'm good. And yourself?
I'm doing wonderful, man. Hey, I heard some good news because we haven't spoken in a couple of weeks. It looks like one of
Right.
our followers actually executed a creative finance deal kind of modeled
Yes.
after the 50-40-10. It was actually a 70-20-10. Uh,
Correct.
but before we get into that, I almost forgot. Do the marketing thing.
That's okay. Again, although I work very happily for Velocity Mortgage Capital, all the ideas and all the ideas and topics discussed on this channel are that of my own. So glad to be back and let's get it going.
Yeah, so you and I have been talking about a 50-40-10. They can find it in your playlist called
Mhm.
non-QM, I believe is what it's called.
Right.
It really talks about creative financing. And one of them is leveraging a combined loan to value, right? You will do loans, which is very unique, up to 90% combined loan to value. So we talk 50-40-10. Obviously, 50
Mhm.
40 is debt, 10% is cash or equity,
Right. Right.
40% is seller debt,
Mhm.
50% is velocity debt. We just had a follower do a 70-20-10. So still 90%
Yep.
CLTV, combined loan to
Yep.
value,
Yep.
70% first, 20% second, 10% cash. But
Correct.
let's celebrate that second because they didn't get a 10% interest or 8% interest. They got something lower than that. What'd they get?
They got a 10-year balloon note at 1% interest only.
So again, just for context, let's just say, for example, let's say the debt was 100 grand. I don't need to know what it is. I just want to do the math.
Right.
So $100,000 times 0.01 equals divided by 12. That's an $83 payment on 100 grand. And then the balloon is due in 10 years, correct?
Right.
That's amazing. So again, creative financing works. It's not illegal. It's funny when we talk about 50-40-10s, people think like we're doing something sneaky. We're not, right? That 20% note in this example that's now complete,
Right.
that's a financial asset, right? That seller, again, using 100 grand as an example, could in
Right.
theory sell it as a note, right? There are these people called note buyers, and they love
Right.
to buy real estate notes, correct?
Oh, correct. I mean, again, there's a whole different, secondary market for those types of notes because, people securitize them and just use them as assets, like you said.
Yeah.
So,
That's essentially what Velocity does, except you're playing in the first market.
right, right. And we're putting together very large securitizations. I mean,
Yeah.
several hundreds of millions of dollars. So, yep. In this case, it's about right from what you said.
Oh,
I mean, we didn't really disclose the borrower last name, so I give you some of the details.
sure.
Purchase price was 950.
Oh, okay.
So about there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about yeah.
So it's a $95,000, you know,
No, it'd be
oh, excuse me,
190,000.
20. Yeah. So yeah, 190, excuse me. Correct.
All right,
One
well,
one
let's
ninety
let's
second.
so let's just do the real math. So 190
Mm-hmm.
grand times
Mm-hmm.
0.01 equals
Mm-hmm.
divided by 12. That's a $158 payment for 190 grand. Again,
Right.
and
Almost 200,000.
the reason this is powerful is because they've actually lowered their blended interest rate because they came to
Right.
you and they probably got,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, 7.75, something like that.
Less.
All right, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then so basically they got 70%, say it's 7.5, and they got 20% at 1.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Good guess, by
blended.
the way, Mike.
Yeah, I've done this before. So their blended interest rate is probably in the high fives. So
I haven't done the math, but I'll leave that up to you.
yeah, I have a spreadsheet that does the math for me. I didn't do it ahead of time, but it's
Mm-hmm.
that's the beauty of the 50-40-10, because how I'm doing it, again, we're going to use prop stream. They're coming on my channel tomorrow, deep dive.
Right.
You've done a deep dive with me on this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to get my blended interest rate for 90% debt under 4%.
Right. Now the other backstory to this is that there was some repositioning along the way because when I originally quoted this person, they assumed that their FICOs were higher, but when we pulled the credit, it actually dropped to the next tier. So then, because initially it was supposed to be a 75-15-10,
Mm.
but because the numbers didn't make sense anymore, we then repositioned to a 70-20-10. And then even at the lower LTV, that lowered the rate even a little bit further.
Sure.
So that allowed it to now make sense as far as the cash flow they needed for their ROI. So we even in after initial submission, we're able to then use more creative kind of repositioning of the deal. So it started off one way, but because of the fact that our product is so accommodating and flexible, that you're
Yeah.
able to reconfigure and still make it work.
So I just want to say for the audience what just happened. So again, we have a buyer who's a one rental at a time fan, who found a seller who was interested in carrying a second.
Shout out to Larry for the referral. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Larry. So again, seller's interested in carrying a second. The buyer comes out and says, "Hey, I think we can do this. I can get my yield that I need at 15% seller carry second." The seller says yes. We start doing the paperwork. The interest rate comes out slightly higher than expected, which hurts cash flow. Cash flow hurts yield. Yield goes down. Buyer goes, "Ooh, this hurts." It doesn't. I want 8.
Almost.
I want 8.
Like the numbers don't make sense anymore.
So then again, this is why creative financing works. You can go back to the seller and say, "Hey, my interest rate on the first is higher than I expected. I need you to carry back an extra 5 or maybe 10%. They did 5.
Right.
At 1%, which is going to lower my blended interest rate, which means my payment's going to be Y instead of X, right? Or X minus. And now my yield goes up. And the seller, because in this market, sellers don't want to relist. They've already mentally checked out. 9 out of 10 sellers will say, yeah, if they're going to carry 15, they'll carry 20.
Right. But I mean, and especially if they're going to get the price that they want or close to it, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So again,
they're out there.
Yeah. So the really key to 50, 40, 10 seller financing is finding the lake. Again, I talk about it, a lake. Prop stream is the lake. Then we put in our fishing lure and figure out how many fish there are. And then it's about having a conversation with the seller, right? I want people to hear me. Creative financing of any ilk, 50, 40, 10, high equity, sub 2, low equity. You and the seller need to click. They need to trust you. And you need to be able to go back, right? In this case, the buyer had a model that worked at 75, 15, 10. The rate came out higher than expected, lower credit score. They came back and said, you know what? We can still get our yield. We could still get our yield and the seller gets their price, but I need you to lend me an extra 5% at basically 5%, 15 to 20. And they're going to do it at 1% interest only. It's a beautiful thing.
Agreed. I mean, it was nice that the circumstances allowed for the change in some of the terms, because sometimes sellers, they don't have enough equity or not willing to carry that extra 5% for whatever reason. It really worked out, but you don't know unless you try. In this case, we were able to kind of reposition it halfway through when things kind of changed on us, unexpectedly. So yeah, creative was definitely the right word in this case.
Yeah, and again, this all boils down to working with the non-QM professional like Stephen Dow at Velocity and understanding how to communicate. Because again, if you're a buyer in this case and you've got a model and you got the owner or the seller to agree to carry 15, you're ecstatic, you're excited. Right. Then you get the bad news. It's like, oh, you're defeated. No, have confidence. You know your numbers. Go back to the seller and say, hey, unfortunately, this, that, the other thing, I didn't get this, I got that. I need you to take a little bit more.
Right.
And then you just wait. What are they going to say? They're not going to carry 20 and they're going to carry 15. So I just want to shout out these folks for doing the work. Creative financing works. I'm going to do a lot. My audience is going to do a lot. If somebody wanted to reach out to you and really figure this 50, 40, 10 after watching the deep dive playlist, how do you want them to do that?
Again, I thank you for making that comment, Mike. That again is just to my email, sdao@velocitymortgage.com. In the subject line, please just put the acronym ORAAT, which stands for one rental at a time. Again, body of the email, simple explanation, what you're looking for. Property address would be great. Maybe city and state at least, just to make sure I lend there. Your mid FICO score and the best number to reach you at. And typically 24, 48 hours, I'll be in touch.
There you go. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.